Hey guys, Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer. We talk about music, books, and occasionally other things. And today we're continuing that series where I rank all 100 albums that I've rated on Rate Your Music thus far. I think you know the rules by now, since this is part 3. And today we're doing numbers 60 through 41. Since you already know the rules, let's get started. Number 60, How the Garden Grows by Apoxapon. So, for those of you who don't know, this album is in a genre called Dungeon Synth. Dungeon Synth is a subgenre of electronic music that's basically like a film score without the film. And it's also inspired by dark ambient and black metal in terms of its atmosphere. It's usually very slow and atmospheric and dark, but the album we're talking about today is a lighter example. I'm a sucker for lighter Dungeon Synth because it's beautiful. And this album is no exception. It makes me feel like I'm walking through a meadow surrounded by elves and fairies, and the nature recordings definitely add to the atmosphere. There are also some surprisingly catchy songs on here. The second half of Moonlit in particular will never leave my brain, and Weed and Vine is also quite catchy. Even the not-so-catchy songs like Gaia and Spring Renewal are still quite beautiful. The one song I don't care for on this album is definitely Night Chorus. This song has a nice atmosphere, but is kinda bland. Other than that, this album is awesome. Light 8 out of 10. Number 59, American Idiot by Green Day.
This is the dawning of the rest of our lives on holiday.
American Idiot is an album that I like, but spoiler alert, I don't think it's Green Day's best, and there is another album from them that will be appearing a little bit later on this 100 song ranking. Don't get me wrong, this album is great, but I still feel like this is an album where the singles are better than the deep cuts for the most part. Wake Me Up When September Ends and Boulevard of Broken Dreams are both beautiful and heartbreaking, and I love the crescendos at the end of both of them. Holiday has some great political commentary and a catchy chorus. American Idiot has one of the best guitar riffs on this entire album, and Jesus of Suburbia somehow manages to hold my attention all the way through, despite being 9 minutes long. However, some of the deep cuts on here can be a little bit meh. Especially Are We the Waiting and Give Me Novocaine, which are just plain boring. And also Letter Bomb, which is an okay song, but it doesn't really work outside of the album. Other than that, most of the deep cuts are just okay. And there are 2 great ones, those being She's a Rebel and St. Jimmy, if only because they're energetic and have good guitar playing. But yeah, this album could have done better in the deep cut department. As for the concept of this album, it's interesting and well written, and it's also pretty easy to follow. In fact, I'm just gonna say it, I don't have an issue with the lyrics on any of these songs. I just wish some of the deep cuts were a bit more interesting musically. Still, I'd give this a light 8 out of 10, because there's just enough highlights to elevate it. Number 58, 2112 by Rush. This is my Uncle David's favorite album of all time. So he's probably surprised that I'm putting it this low if he's watching. That said, while I do love 2112 the song, I don't listen to it that often just because of its length. However, I do think it's a great song with a lot of energy and interesting instrumental switch-ups, and some great storytelling, of course. However, my favorite song on here is easily A Passage to Bangkok. Mainly because the chorus is easily the best chorus on this album, and also because the opening guitar riff is great. Seriously. If I found out My Chemical Romance were inspired by that guitar riff when they created Give 'Em Hell Kid, I would not be surprised. Also, this song is about marijuana, and my mind was blown when I found out. As for the other songs on here, the only one I would really consider great is Tears, if only because it's refreshing to hear Rush do a ballad. The other songs all range from pretty good to okay. Although I will say, Something for Nothing could have been great if it wasn't for the icky Ayn Rand fanboyisms. God, I'm glad Neil grew out of that phase. Also, light 8 out of 10. Number 57, Blurry Face by 21 Pilots.
When the mama sang us to sleep, but now we're stressed out. Wish we could turn back time to the good old days.
Now here's where 21 Pilots started getting really good. Not as good as Vessel, granted, but much better than the first two albums. All of the songs on here are at least decent, and several are downright great. Among the great songs are Heavy Dirty Soul, which features some of the fastest rapping of 21 Pilots' career, as well as some energetic percussion that almost sounds like it could be on a drum and bass album. And then Stressed Out is also really great. That one has some super relatable lyrics about wanting to be young and innocent again, which, as someone who went through a lot at an early age, I can kind of relate to. I also love the instrumental switch-ups on Lane Boy, the catchiness of Doubt, the smoothness of Hometown, and the energetic drumming mixed with the ukulele on We Don't Believe What's on TV. Tearin' My Heart is a great pop-leaning song, and the synths sound downright beautiful on it. Other than those songs, this album mostly ranges from pretty good to okay. However, there are no songs that I would skip, and there are also enough highlights for me to give this a light 8 out of 10. Number 56, Lovely Little Lonely by The Main.
Deja vu, hoping for the right words, waiting for the right words.
From the first truly great 21 Pilots album to appear on this ranking, to the first truly great album from The Main to appear here. While not as great as the two albums that came right before this one, trust me, we'll get to them, Lovely Little Lonely is still a great album. In particular, the songs Don't Come Down, Bad Behavior, Black Butterflies, and Deja Vu, and Do You Remember the Other Half of 23 are super catchy and fun. And Taxi and The Sound of Reverie managed to be super introspective while still maintaining some of that energy. And I Only Want to Talk to You is a beautiful ballad that absolutely breaks my heart. That said, my main problem with this album is that it has way too many interludes. 3 in total, plus Lost in Nostalgia, which is so short that it might as well be an interlude. And I get that the tracks are all supposed to be connected, which is cool, but why not just make these interludes part of the songs? Like, they actually did that on the previous album, American Candy, with the transition between English Girls and 24 Floors, so why couldn't they have done it here? Also, Lost in Nostalgia should have been fleshed out more into a proper song. Aside from that, this album is great. I give it a light 8 out of 10. Number 55, Entertainment by Water Parks.
I'm sweating out potential, but I'm nervous ever central for you.
This album is pretty contentious among Water Parks fans, and I can kinda see why. It has more electronic elements than the previous album, Double Dare. Trust me, we'll get to it. However, I'd argue that the electronic elements actually work on this album more times than they don't. Not Warriors has a rock mixed with synth pop sound that I'm a real sucker for, and Peach Lobotomy is super catchy. I mean, I often find myself humming lobotomy to myself at just random points. Also, not all of these songs are electronic oriented. Did we forget the lead single, Blonde, which basically sounds like it came straight off of Double Dare? Or the heartwarming ballad, Lucky People? Or Rare, which is not one of my personal favorites, but it still sounds like a Double Dare song. Or even 1111 with its Panic at the Disco-esque opening and pop-punk flair. Or the aggressive song Tantrum. I will admit that the electronic elements don't always work. The song Crybaby takes it way too far, to the point where I just find it kind of boring, and it just makes me think of Melanie Martinez. And We Need to Talk has a really annoying Justin Bieber interpolation. Seriously. Your mama likes me and she doesn't like anyone? Shut up, Austin. And Sleep Alone could have been a good song if it wasn't for that obnoxious noise that starts off the song and continues throughout it. Still, there's enough good here for me to give this a light 8 out of 10. Number 54, Fly By Night by Rush. Out of Rush's first 3 albums, Fly By Night is definitely my favorite. The title track is a classic for a reason, and I'm actually torn between that song and Best I Can for my favorite song on this album. On one hand, Best I Can is a fun Geddy Lee written song about how great rock music is. On the other hand, Fly By Night is just a masterpiece. As for the other songs, Anthem is a fun, energetic song with some great guitar work, so much so that it almost makes me forget the icky Ayn Rand worship in the lyrics. Almost. And then there's Beneath, Between, and Behind, which is a song by some Canadians criticizing America, which, as an American, I'm all for. However, as much as I love some of the songs on this album, By Tor and the Snow Dog, while it sounds great musically, I feel like the concept isn't as deep or epic as the band thinks it is. And also, the album kind of falls off at the end. Making Memories is a nice song, but it's basically a standard touring is fun song. Rivendell is nice enough, but it also kind of is a bit too slow. And in the end, takes way too long to get going. Still, there aren't any bad songs on here, and there are plenty of great ones, so decent 8 out of 10. Number 53, Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. An album that needs no introduction and is so beloved in music nerd circles that it's the third highest rated album on RateYourMusic, right behind Radiohead's OK Computer and Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. While I may not like it quite as much as everyone else in the music nerd world, I still think this is a great album. Especially Welcome to the Machine, where David Gilmour almost sounds like he's crying, and the synthesizer just sounds so cold and eerie in the best way possible. Also, how could you not love the bounciness of Have a Cigar, which almost sounds like it's connected to Welcome to the Machine with its synthesizer, which sounds exactly like it, and lyrics that sound like what happens after the guy who is described in Welcome to the Machine gives in to the machine, if any of that made any sense. Shine On You Crazy Diamond Parts 1 and 2 are also great. And while I don't listen to them that often, due to their length and them being on opposite ends of an album, I still think that they sound incredible, and when I do listen to them, it's great. Like, the instrumentation is so clear and beautiful that it almost sounds like a crystal, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't, but you get what I mean. Also, while I think David Gilmour is a more emotional singer than Roger Waters, as shown on Welcome to the Machine, I still feel like Roger Waters is the better singer overall, and he really shines on these songs. The only track on here I don't care for is Wish You Were Here. Sure, it's a nice enough ballad, but by Pink Floyd standards, it's just kind of forgettable. Still, this album is great. Decent 8 out of 10. Number 52, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Another progressive rock classic that music nerds absolutely love. This album is number 4 on RateYourMusic's Greatest of All Time charts, right behind Wish You Were Here. And while I don't like it as much as everyone else, I still really like this album. My favorite song on this album is easily 21st Century Schizoid Man, which has this angry, visceral vocal performance, and some anti-war lyrics, and I really love the jazz influence in the second half of the track. In the Court of the Crimson King, the title track, basically, is gorgeous and epic and has some great symphonic swell to it. And then there's Epitaph, which is one of my favorite songs to listen to when I'm going through hard times. Like, Confusion will be my epitaph. Yeah, that sounds about right. However, while I love those three songs, and find I Talk to the Wind to be a decent enough ballad, I do not care for the song Moonchild. I especially hate how it just starts doing nothing in the middle of the song. Guys, I get that prog is supposed to be experimental and weird, but this is just taking it to a ridiculous level. In other words, while this album certainly has higher highs than Wish You Were Here, I just barely find it to be a better album. Barely. As such, I give it a decent 8 out of 10. Number 51, The Silent Force by Within Temptation. Like I said in my previous part of this series, I've loved Within Temptation since I was a preteen. And in that video, I also stated the controversial opinion that some of their post-sellout stuff is actually better than Mother Earth. Case in point, The Silent Force, a beautiful album that doesn't have any truly annoying tracks like Mother Earth had with Intro. My favorite track on here is easily It's the Fear, a song that reminds me more than a little of Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader from Star Wars, which, as an angsty preteen watching Star Wars for the first time, I found Anakin Skywalker super relatable, not gonna lie. Yeah, I don't know how I'd feel about the Star Wars prequels if I were to watch them today, but back then I related to Anakin. And yeah, this song brings back those feelings in the best way possible. Other great songs on this album include the eerily prophetic Forsaken, the beautifully motivating Stand My Ground, and the just plain beautiful Jillian, I'd Give My Heart, and See Who I Am. Of course, the big hits from this album are also great, those being Memories and Angels. Angels in particular is a great reminder that just because you've been through some terrible things in the past doesn't give you the right to hurt others, which is something I should probably be reminded of. That's it for the highlights on this album. However, that's over half the album, so I'd still say this is a great album. If I had to pick a weak link, it would probably be Somewhere, which is pleasant but a little boring. I give this a decent 8 out of 10. Number 50! The Heart of Everything by Within Temptation. Another great album from Within Temptation. I like this one just a little bit more than The Silent Force, because it's got more variety, more catchiness, more songs that I go back to more often, and it's just a little bit more consistent overall. Particularly, Hand of Sorrow is a beautiful song, which is apparently about the Farseer trilogy, which is a trilogy of books that I've never read, but I've heard good things about on BookTube. Frozen is also gorgeous, And I really like the chanted chorus on Our Solemn Hour. It just makes the song even more catchy. Other great songs include All I Need with its catchy chorus, the heavy werewolf-themed song The Howling, and the title track, The Heart of Everything. Oh, and the last two tracks are just perfect. Those being The Truth Beneath the Rose, which is a song about realizing that being a religious zealot is wrong. Even though I've never been one myself, I can kind of relate to this song just because of my Gamergate phase. And Forgiven, which is a heartbreaking ballad about the suicide of a friend of the band's. The one thing I will say in favor of The Silent Force over this album is that The Silent Force did not have as deep of lows as this album. What Have You Done, the main big hit from this album, is super poppy in all the wrong ways. And The Cross has this annoying sound throughout that just irritates me. I give this album a decent 8 out of 10. Number 49, Double Dare by Water Parks. I discovered this album back in the day thanks to John from ARTV's review of it. And at the time, I thought it was the coolest album ever. While it has shrunk on me a bit since those days, I still think this is a great album. The lead single, Stupid for You, in particular, is super catchy and fun and has tons of quotable lines. Also, you could argue that they're a bit stupid, some of them, but look at the title. It's called Stupid for You. Obviously, this is meant to be a song about being so in love with a girl that it causes you to say stupid stuff. And unlike Blake Shelton's Honeybee, it's actually clever about it. Take Her to the Moon is a bit more of a pop-leaning track, but it's a really good pop song with even more quotable lines. The more aggressive tracks, Little Violence and Plum Island, are really fun and catchy despite the anger. And Hawaii, Stay Awake, and Gloom Boys are both very introspective and also very catchy, with Gloom Boys containing the great lines, I like happy songs with titles that don't match at all, which pretty much sums up this entire album. Other great songs include 21 Questions, which is easily the best ballad on here with that crescendo, It Follows, which has some interesting horror movie references, and Made in America, my personal favorite, which is basically a song with some surprisingly potent social commentary and some great danceable instrumentation. The only songs on here I don't care for are Powerless, which is just kinda boring, and I'll Always Be Around, which sounds way too much like something NSYNC would make for my liking. Still, despite those songs, this album is a great album. Decent 8 out of 10. Number 48, Lamentations by American Aquarium.
Is the one you won't chase down. They say sing your song, boy, shut your mouth. But I believe in a better sound.
The first of 3 underground country albums that I'll be covering in this series. Lamentations by American Aquarium is easily the weakest of the 3, but I'd still argue it's a pretty great album. I like the way the instrumentation ranges from more traditional sounding country to more string and piano oriented stuff. And I like the lyrics, of course. This is an alternative country release. Of course the lyrics are great. And I love how this album is about B.J. Barham, the lead singer, trying to improve both himself and the South as a whole. The best examples of all of this include 6 Years Come September, which is an absolutely heartbreaking song, which falls into the string and piano category, and has some absolutely heartbreaking lyrics about B.J. Barham's struggles with alcoholism and how it caused him to lose his partner and his child, and also about a drunk driving incident that happened. Yeah, it's sad, but it's not even the saddest song on the album. That award is a tie between How Wicked I Was and The Day I Learned to Lie to You, both of which have absolutely beautiful piano on them, and some lyrics that anyone who's ever hurt someone they love can relate to. Looking at you, me. On the more political side of things, there's the songs Bright Leaf and Burley and A Better South, the former of which is a song about legalizing marijuana and how it could help revitalize farms in the South that previously sold tobacco, and also A Better South, which is a song about how the South should stop being so backwards and stop idolizing people who basically betrayed this country, like the Confederate States, for example. And yeah, both of these songs are bold and have amazing lyrics, and they have some great organic country instrumentation to back it up. My other favorite song on here is easily Starts With You, which is a bit more of a love song, but it has some great organic country instrumentation, and also some quotable lines. As for songs I don't care for, Me and Mine Lamentations goes on way too long, and does some both sidesism that I didn't care for. And The Luckier You Get is great musically, but lyrically it just sounds like it's about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which is pure capitalist propaganda, let's be real. Other than that, this album is great. Solid 8 out of 10. Number 47. Eternal Night by Night of the Vampire. This is a 3-song EP, so I don't really have that much to say about it. However, I will say that this album has a great blend of black and roll and death rock, and is super catchy and fun while maintaining that black metal spookiness. Also, this is to date the only thing this band has released, and I really hope a full length comes out soon, guys. I'd like to hear more like this. Solid 8 out of 10. Number 46, Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division.
Cause these sensations make me feel the pleasures of another man. These sensations spare the insults, leave them for another day.
Speaking of post-punk oriented stuff, Joy Division is an absolutely classic act in the post-punk genre. Even if you've never heard any of their music, you've likely seen the album cover for this album. And you definitely have now, because I have it right here. Also, if you haven't heard this album, you should definitely check it out because it's great. Even though most of these songs are really depressing, they still manage to be catchy and even danceable at points. Good examples of this include Disorder and She's Lost Control, both of which are super upbeat, despite the fact that they're both very dark. Same goes for Shadow Play, easily the most aggressive song on this album. Insight has an interesting intro, which sounds like it's creeping up on you, and then it grabs you by the throat and makes you listen to the depressed talk of someone who's been suffering for a long time. Day of the Lords is also surprisingly catchy despite how slow it is. And Interzone, despite being the most traditional rock-sounding song here, is still an awesome track, just for how rockin' it is. The other songs on this album are all pretty good, too. If I had to pick a least favorite, it would probably be I Remember Nothing, just because, well, because it doesn't grab me as much, that's why. But still, if that's the worst this album can give me, I still say this is a great album. Solid 8 out of 10. Number 45, Scaled and Icy by 21 Pilots.
Lady, no, you'll be in and out, man. Float you a couple bands, then you head to Mexico.
Yes, for those of you who haven't seen my 21 Pilots ranking, I'm a Scaled and Icy defender. Don't get me wrong, I get why people hate this. It's a bit more upbeat and fun than most of 21 Pilots' stuff, at least on the surface. However, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that this is actually about pretending to smile even as the creeping feeling of dread closes in around you, and I think it does a good job of pulling that feeling off. What I especially love about this album is just how catchy and fun so many of these songs are, while still maintaining that feeling of dread. It's basically what 21 Pilots have always done, just a little less obvious. Also, this kind of reminds me of AJR, except much less overproduced. My three favorite songs on here are easily The Outside, Saturday, and Bounce Man. All three of which are just so catchy and fun, and they get me, will make me want to start dancing every time I hear them. And other songs I really like include the protest song Never Take It, the song Good Day, which perfectly encapsulates the feeling that this album is going for, and also Shy Away with its amazing drum work. So yeah, I'm a defender of this album. Give it another listen if you just dismissed it because you thought it sounded too happy. I give it a solid 8 out of 10. Number 44, 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge by My Chemical Romance. While not as good as The Black Parade, trust me, we'll get to it, I still love 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge. Like The Black Parade, it's a super interesting concept album. In this case, it's about how a guy who gets sent down to hell, but is only allowed to see his girlfriend again if he makes a deal with the devil that he'll kill sinners and send them down to hell, which he agrees to. Interesting concept, but I would argue it's not as well written as The Black Parade. Also, while the instrumentation here is punchy and intense, I'd argue the theatrical elements are not fully realized yet. However, this album is still full of great tracks, with my personal favorites being Hang 'Em High with its western flair, The Ghost of You, which is just a beautiful ballad, Thank You for the Venom, which is the heaviest track on here, the punchy and intense You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison, and I Never Told You What I Do for a Living, Give 'Em Hell Kid, which, as I said earlier, reminds me more than a little bit of A Passage to Bangkok by Rush, and also the angsty teenage anthem, I'm Not Okay, I Promise. Seriously, this album is great. Just not as great as The Black Parade. Still, solid 8 out of 10. Number 43, Don't Panic by All Time Low. Putting aside the numerous disgusting allegations against All Time Low, believe me, look that up on your own time. I still think they're a great band, musically. In fact, Don't Panic isn't even the highest rated album from them on this list. Again, we'll get to it. Meanwhile, let's talk about Don't Panic. This album is full of hidden gems, including Outlines, which has the best hook on an album full of great hooks, and The Irony of Choking on a Lifesaver, which has a writing that is just as interesting as the title would imply. And some of the singles on here are great too. Like the big hits, like The Reckless and the Brave, Somewhere in Neverland, which fully captured the youthful spirit of All Time Low. And also Backseat Serenade, which has a great sing-along chorus. And of course, there's Paint You Wings, which is kind of a sleeper hit and has parts that sound like butterfly wings fluttering. Other favorites include the slightly heavier Thanks to You, and the aggressive drumming on So Long Soldier. If there's one song I would skip on this album, it would probably be To Live and Let Go, because it's just kind of a boring song. Other than that, though, this album is absolutely great. Solid 8 out of 10. Number 42, Sell Your Soul by The Creep Show. Time for some spooky Halloween music in the middle of March. The Creep Show, for those of you who don't know, are a psychobilly band, meaning they blend rockabilly, such as Elvis and Buddy Holly, with punk, such as the Ramones and Black Flag. Most psychobilly bands also have horror-themed lyrics, and this album is no exception. This album is filled with Halloween songs that could easily rival the Monster Mash if these guys were more popular. Zombies Ate Her Brain, Creatures of the Night, Gravediggers, Cherry Hill. Wow, this album is stacked. However, not all of the songs on here are about Halloween stuff. Songs like Shake, Psycho Ball and Chain, and Doghouse are just love/breakup songs, but even they rock. In fact, I once heard someone on RateYourMusic say that this album sounds like a cross between My Chemical Romance and The Misfits, which I can totally see. However, While I am praising this album to high heavens, there are a couple of flaws with it. Especially the song Candy Kiss, which is basically a song comparing sex to candy, which is one of my musical pet peeves for those of you who don't know. And still, I enjoy this album. Solid 8 out of 10. Number 41, Trench by 21 Pilots. Oh yes, my second favorite 21 Pilots album. This one has some great songs, such as Neon Gravestones, which is with its amazing message about not romanticizing suicide. My Blood, with its absolutely thumping bass line. And Levitate, with its surprisingly technical rapping. However, there are some songs on here I don't care for. Namely Smithereens, which is easily the worst love song they've ever done, just because the instrumentation isn't as bright and happy as a love song should be. And also, The Hype and Cut My Lip are both okay, but they could have been cut. However, moments like these are easily outnumbered by the thudding bass on Jumpsuit, the head-bobbing majesty that is Chlorine, the heartbreaking Legend and Leave the City, the experimental Pet Cheetah, and the way that Bandito builds to that crescendo. This album is great, even if it does have a few tracks that could have been cut. Solid 8 out of 10. And with that, we have reached 3/5 of the way into this list, which means we have to stop here. Don't worry though, part 4 will be coming as soon as I'm done with my March Madness special. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I'm Morgan the Rebellious Reviewer, and I'm out.